What's going on, everyone? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres with ScoopDuck on 3, coming to you on Tuesday, April 22nd, 2025. We got a big episode in store for you guys today. Thank you so much for being here. Glad to have you along for some Duck talk, some Duck football. We're going to have a bunch of insight from Oregon's big recruiting weekend. And we're going to talk about this Oregon team in 2025 as we look ahead to the spring game, Oregon's annual spring game on Saturday, 1 p.m. at Autzen Stadium in Eugene. Should be an awesome week, a tremendous week, one might even say, in the Oregon football world. Joining me, as always, is ScoopDuck owner and publisher Justin Hopkins. J-Hop, how are you?
Good. Great week. Like you alluded to, I mean, we get a spring game, first of all, and it's spring game week, NFL draft weekend as well. A lot of recruiting visits that just happened and even more that are coming up. So, like you and I talk about, life's good when there's stuff going on.
We love it. I don't even want to think about May. There's still going to be recruiting to cover, but not necessarily as much football. So it's always fun when we get to hear from the coaches and we get to hear from the players, some new faces that have joined the team from the transfer portal. Haven't gotten to hear from any of the true freshmen, but Oregon doesn't usually make true freshmen available to the media. I think the last one might have been Noah Sewell after he made his debut against Wazoo. But that was a fun time. We're focused on the 2025 Ducks. So I'm thinking here, Justin, we can start with some of the recruits that were in town for Dan Lanning and the Ducks. I know we were talking about it earlier on today over on ScoopDuck and on the message boards. Make sure to check us out for just $1 if you guys aren't already a part of this awesome community we have over with the Oregon fans at On 3, ScoopDuck On 3 specifically. Was that this upcoming weekend for the spring game may not be as star-studded or as loaded as this past weekend was. And I had talked to you about how I had been told that after talking to one of my sources. And I was a bit surprised to hear that, to be honest, because it's pretty much always been Oregon's biggest recruiting weekend of the year, the spring game. And we know that they're not going to be able to have Saturday Night Live this year, that annual camp they usually have at the end of July. Believe it's because of some new NCAA restrictions. But there's definitely not going to be a shortage of star power because the number one player in the country in Jackson Cantwell has come back to Eugene.
Yeah, no, it's going to be, like you said, you and I are recording this sandwiched in between two, big recruiting weekends, but they're big for different reasons. I think this past weekend that we just finished with, had some guys that you're looking to make some waves with, some good players in the 26 class, but featured quite a few 27 guys that you're looking to get in early on. Gyrie Edwards was a big one that visited. Elbert Hill was another big one that visited this past weekend. But I think you look ahead to this coming weekend, and if you start off with Jackson Cantwell right there, makes it a big weekend, and we know what's kind of at stake there because he takes that visit. The spring game's the 26th, Sunday's the 27th. And just a few days later on the 30th, he's making his college decision. So, for Oregon, you're getting the last swing. What does that mean? Are you, is Miami the team to beat right now? Can you get ahead of them? Obviously a lot of questions. And I think to your point and what you were saying, what we've been saying on ScoopDuck is just that I don't think there will be as many visitors on campus this spring game weekend as there was the past weekend, but it'll be more of a quality versus quantity. We start to take a look at the early list, and it's Richard Wesley and it's Jackson Cantwell and it's some of these other guys that I think, Oregon's really kind of trying to make a move with, really trying to close on or set themselves up for a really, good official visit season with these guys coming back. Cantwell obviously won't because he's going to make his decision whether if it's Oregon, he'll probably be back. If it's not Oregon, he probably won't. But, just some of those guys and I think why you do that, if you're Oregon, is it gives you an opportunity to spend more time with those guys, a little bit more intimate, if you will, a little more one-on-one time. You're able to kind of make the sell a little better versus when you have 24 kids on campus. So I'm sure that's probably some of the philosophy. And again, just because there's not 27 guys on campus doesn't mean it's not a big weekend, because it is a really big weekend.
We'll get to some more from this past weekend's visitors, but because we did mention Cantwell, Justin, I just wanted to talk about him a little bit more here. His timeline's been a little bit all over the place. Because I know I was on my camping trip, and one of the big developments that came out while I was off the grid was that he was going to be coming back to Oregon. It was going to be his official visit, and he's going to be making his decision pretty much right after taking that trip. So in the span of a week or so, with these developments kind of coming out for Cantwell, it seemed like Miami was the team to beat, and he's still kind of working from that unofficial, official top three of Oregon, Miami, and Georgia. And he had just basically said, I don't know what else I can get from another visit. I feel like I have all the information I need. Like, it just shows how fluid recruiting is in the year 2025, Justin. But it certainly doesn't hurt Oregon's chances that they're getting him back on campus for one more visit. They're going to be the school that essentially has the last impression on Cantwell when he goes to make that college commitment. So I don't know. I think this one's a little bit hard to get a pulse on because we know that there's the Missouri connection with Lanning. We know about the track and field connections with him at Oregon. But I don't know. I guess from a week ago to now, I went from, I wouldn't say pessimistic, but it didn't seem like I didn't think that Oregon was going to be the choice to, as Lee Corso would say, not so fast, my friend.
Yeah, I'm with you. And here's the thing. Here's where I'm at. It's we're recording on a Tuesday or whatever. Everybody, where's he going to go? Where's he going to go? Well, I mean, honestly, that's what this weekend's for, right? I mean, there's no need to make a prediction on where he's going to commit to Oregon or Miami or Georgia or whatever when he's about to take another visit in 3 days. So, it's just kind of a time to be cautious and see. I think if his decision was today, it would probably be Miami. But again, now Oregon's getting a visit, so that could easily change things. So don't write him off just yet. Also, don't write him in just yet because he's taking the visit. I think this one's going to come down to the wire. And we'd just be fools if we said that, he's going to leave Eugene, go back to Missouri, and Miami's not going to pick up the phone and make a last-ditch effort. They're going to. So, that window of like the 28th to the 30th before his decision, it's probably going to be a lot of back and forth, and we'll just have to see what develops from it.
And then just a little bit more here on Cantwell, because he's kind of tied at the hip more or less with Emmanuel Ahianacho, right? The other 5-star offensive tackle that Oregon's going for. I think just right along with the update that we got from Cantwell, just with him saying essentially like I don't need to take any more visits to now taking another visit. We also have Ahianacho more or less naming Oregon his new leader. This is the second time he's called Oregon his leader, and sandwiched in between those 2 times, Maryland was his leader. So it's just a little bit of a crazy time right now for Duck recruiting and specifically along the offensive line. But I mean, I think you feel at the very least that Oregon's in a great spot with both of them. But I would imagine that they're going to kind of have to choose here behind the scenes, behind closed doors, by the time Cantwell makes his decision. I would think not that they necessarily have their pick between the two, but like that's obviously something they're going to have to weigh right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's no real coincidence here in my mind. I think Oregon felt really good about Cantwell for a while. Then obviously it shifted to Miami. And right about that time coming out of that, Oregon, went from kind of being an afterthought with Ahianacho, which they weren't, but they were still in the top 3, not number 1, to all of a sudden getting him on campus and moving back to number 1. I think if you're Oregon, you didn't feel good about your position with Cantwell, and you just don't want to get left caught without either one of them. You'd like to get one of Cantwell or Emmanuel Ahianacho. And I think if we had Dan Lanning on the show and he could be bluntly honest, I think he'd say they prioritize Cantwell over Ahianacho a little bit. Both really good. You're not going to be sad about landing either one of them or whichever one you might be able to get. But I think Cantwell's the guy that in a perfect world they would be able to sign. So the good news is now you can push for Cantwell with this visit, coming out of the visit, the immediate decision. And if you don't get the answer you're hoping for, you've got a pretty safe pivot to Ahianacho and can continue to make that push there. Again, I'll say it again. I've said it a bunch of times. I know I have. I just don't see a way Oregon gets both. They're both going to want to come in and play that coveted left tackle spot because they're both 5 stars, the top 2 players at their position. I believe top 10 players overall, both really, really, really good football players to be be very fortunate to have either one. But they're both going to want to come in and play left tackle. And additionally, they're both going to command a fair NIL offering. Whatever that number is, it is, but you're going to have to make that commitment financially to one of them. And I just don't think Oregon is going to be able to make the commitment that it takes to get one of them and keep Green committed as well, and then go back and get a third tackle at a premium price point. It's just not realistic, and it's probably not financially responsible. So again, you're going to get one of those two, and you're going to do your best to hang on to Green. And I think you're going to move on with your class, get a couple more interior guys, and see what you can do there. That's really the best case scenario for Oregon. And for the fans that think you want to land both Cantwell and Nacho and hang on to Green, I just don't think that that's realistic.
I think it's also important to remember the Ducks are recruiting 2026 offensive tackle Tommy Toffee out of San Francisco, Archbishop Reardon, and he was a guy that was recently on campus, and I know Justin got an interview with him, so you guys can read that and all of our other awesome content over at ScoopDuck right now. Reminder, just $1 for a whole week of access, and there's no better time. Spring games this week. We're going to have a lot of awesome coverage of that this weekend, and then we kind of go right into official visits before you know it. So ScoopDuck's the place to be, and we want you guys to be there along for the ride with us. Let's shift our focus now, Justin, to one of the visitors that was on campus this weekend, and that is one of the very best on the West Coast in 2026, Bishop Gorman safety Jett Washington. And the interesting thing with Washington, Justin, is that I think you and I both always knew that he was a priority for Oregon, but there just really hasn't been like a sustained amount of buzz for Oregon and Jett Washington. And I think part of the reason is because he's only been on campus twice, at least in the last year or so. He was on campus for the Ohio State game. Great game to be on campus for reasons we don't need to get into. That's pretty obvious, but that was one of the big changes in this visit, the differences in this visit, I should say, is that he got to be there on kind of a more low-key or like average day. He told me it's kind of easy to get caught up in all the hype of the game day, but this is just, your regular going through the grind, going in your meetings, going to practice and scrimmages. And his mom got to make the trip with him. So I really like where Oregon stands for Jett Washington. You can read the full interview and get all the quotes from Washington himself on the trip over on ScoopDuck. And it definitely seems like Oregon and Alabama have been two of the teams that have created the most separation here.
Yeah, and I know that maybe he's operating on a top 2 or top 3, or we'll just say top 4 to be safe, but it really just doesn't feel like he's in a mode where he's pushing to make a commitment, right? It just doesn't feel like, if you're Oregon, I think if you're Oregon, as long as you can stay top 2 or top 3, you're in the hunt, right? And I think that's where you want to be. You want to be in that range so that when things do start to get closer to that potential decision, you're in the mix and can make your move. And I think that's where Oregon's tried to be with Jett Washington. I think this is one of the guys that they haven't necessarily laid in the weeds on, but like you said, haven't necessarily been like, maybe like, you read about Ihenicho and he says, Oregon's my leader. Well, that creates a lot of headlines, right? That kind of lets everybody know who the team to beat is. And they haven't really done that with Jett Washington. And I think that, that might be by design. I mean, because this is we've seen that they've tried to get longer in that back end, and we're finally going to see that a little bit more this season. And then through recruiting, I think they want to continue that. You look at a guy like Jett Washington, we'll just call him all of 6'3" at the very least. There's a lanky safety back there that's got a ton of range, and a really key piece to the recruiting class. So we'll see what develops. But again, the difference here is this isn't like Jackson Cantwell where a decision is coming in a week or two. This is, hey, just stay in the game, keep getting them on campus, and make sure you're locked in for your official visit.
Dare you say, Justin, keep chopping wood?
Pretty much. Keep chopping wood. This is a keep chopping wood one. Whereas with Jackson Cantwell, you need to break out the friggin' chainsaw.
We need that tree down today.
Yeah, the tree needs to come down.
Jett Washington's a phenomenal talent. I mean, if you're on the West Coast, you know about him. He's also a hooper at Bishop Gorman, won a state title, was named the Nevada Max Preps Player of the Year for football this past season. And he's like 6'4", 6'5", so just massive frame. freakish athlete kind of a deal. And I want to talk about another DB that was on campus. Big weekend for Oregon with defensive back recruiting and another safety. Baltimore, Maryland, St. Francis Academy safety Gyrie Edwards was back in Eugene for his 5th visit with the Ducks. And I don't think that number surprises many that follow Oregon recruiting, because you know that Gyrie Edwards has been a guy who's been on campus quite a bit. I want to say his last visit was maybe for the Michigan State game last year or the Maryland game. I know he was at a game last year, but I was a little surprised that it took him this long to get back out to Oregon for another visit. But I don't think that that is an issue, because he still has Oregon very high on his board. Another guy that I got an interview with, and you can read it over at ScoopDuck. It was just kind of an opportunity for Oregon to remind him of what they're building. And he loves Ife Obadegwu, really close relationship with him, obviously another St. Francis guy. So I think that Gyrie Edwards is obviously someone the Ducks would love to have in their secondary. If Chris Hampton is in a world where you can sign Gyrie Edwards and Jett Washington, you're loving that, and just what that looks like on the back end. And then let's not forget Joey O'Brien, the talented athlete slash safety out of not Philadelphia, but Pennsylvania. He was just on campus, and it sounds like Oregon make a good impression there, and they're slated to get him back for another visit. So things are developing really quickly with Oregon, specifically in the secondary, as they look for more pieces to add next to Xavier Larice out of Florida.
Yeah, I think the thing that Oregon fans need to keep in mind here, and I'm not speaking specifically to Gyrie Edwards, but this, in fact, I think if we take a big step back and take a broad look, I think Oregon would probably like to take somewhere between 5 and 6 defensive backs in this class. Okay, the number can change a little bit, but I think ideally, and I'm speaking all of defensive backs, not safeties. And so if you take a look at that and you say, okay, maybe we can close on a Jett Washington, maybe we can close on a Gyrie Edwards. Obviously, Xavier Larice is committed. We haven't got to him, but we will. Another guy, Davon Benjamin, that visited Oregon, and the Ducks are in the thick four. All of a sudden, I mean, I've just thrown out 4 guys right there. And there's still, Brandon Arrington and Albert Hill and other guys that have been on campus that we'll talk about. Oregon's in a really good spot. They don't need to close on all these guys. They don't need every single one of them. They just need the right 5 or 6. And I think you look at what Edwards brings to the table. You look at what Jett Washington brings to the table. I think they're a really good complement to what Xavier Larice does really well. He seems to be a little bit more of a star type of a safety, in my opinion, where these 2 guys are a little bit more of the true safety, a field and a boundary. And so you start looking at these 2 guys. If you're taking 5 or 6 guys, you're in really good shape with the guys you need. So in terms of Edwards, like you said, he's been on campus a lot. That's a lot of visits for a guy that lives across the country. And so it seems to me that would suggest distance isn't a major hurdle there, which is nice, music to our ears. And I think, with Edwards, I think this is a guy that now really turns to his official visits in the coming month or month and a half, and we'll see things heat up. So getting him back now was great, probably cemented your spot for the official visit moving forward, and you go from there. So I feel really good about Oregon's defensive back recruiting. I think this is going to be one of the things where the pieces just kind of start to fall into place pretty seamlessly.
We know that Oregon's also made a really big push into the DMV area, and I think that that's been much more apparent here in the 2026 cycle with a lot of guys that they hosted. Nick Abrams is another one that we haven't even talked about, the talented linebacker out of McDonough High School, where the Ducks just signed 4-star corner Brandon Finney a cycle ago. He took his first trip out to Oregon this past weekend, has the Ducks in his top 5, and we don't really need to get into him right now. I have one more guy I wanted to talk about, Justin, before we go team. But the interesting kind of tidbit to marinate on here with Abrams is it sounds like he may only take 3 official visits before he makes his college commitment. I think it's July 16th or sometime in July. And he basically said that even if I don't take an official visit to that school, like that school still has a chance. So just one that's worth following there in the 2026 class as Brian Michalowski looks for more linebackers to add to Oregon's 2026 haul. But I want to circle back to Davon Benjamin, Justin, because that's another guy that Oregon had on campus this past weekend. And I've talked to him a number of times, have yet to meet him in person, unfortunately, even though he's out here in Southern California. But man, I don't know if you read the interview, but like it's hard to get a pulse on that guy's recruitment. Like he just really, really does a good job of holding his cards close to the vest. I mean, coming out, he was on campus this weekend again. That's obviously why we're talking to him about him. But I think for Oregon, the thing that I thought was super interesting was just not only his versatility as a player. I think that's one of his greatest assets, but just when I asked him what stood out about Oregon, he said that it was how young they are. And I thought that was just really interesting because maybe you listen to people talk about Oregon this upcoming season and where some of their concerns maybe come from or question marks, and a little bit of it is in the secondary and how young they are.
Yeah, Davon Benjamin's a guy that I think we've both felt like Oregon's been a great position for a little while now. Whether they've led or not, I think we felt pretty confident in top two. And again, the reason I mentioned him, and that's part of why I mentioned him a moment ago, is you start looking at some of these pieces and you say, okay, you landed Davon Benjamin, maybe you can pull an Edwards or a Jett Washington, you put it with Larice. All of a sudden you're looking at 3, potentially 4 commits, and there's still 5 other guys that we could name. That Oregon's probably in the top 3 for, Joey O'Brien being one, Albert Hill being another one. There's more on top of that. USC's done a great job recruiting, cornerbacks and the secondary so far early in this cycle. Obviously, with Sermons and Lockhart committed out of the SoCal area, it'd be nice for Oregon to get Davon Benjamin, kind of lock him up, pull one of those SoCal guys, and really just round out this class. He's more of a true cornerback. And like you said a moment ago, I mean, Benjamin does a really good job not giving a lot away, as does Brandon Arrington. That's another DB, that the Ducks are in the thick for. And neither one of those guys is like gives you the, I love this team, I love this coach, like they love them all, but not like anyone specific. And so, I think they've done a good job there. I still think, I know you and I have felt good about Benjamin for a little while now. It seems that Steve Wiltfong is reiterating that from the information he's been given on his own as well. So, I mean, those are all pretty good signs. And at the end of the day, no matter what USC has been able to do in the secondary so far, they're not going to sign them all, right? I mean, I said it last year with Ohio State when they were cleaning house in the secondary. It's like they're not going to sign them all. And lo and behold, they didn't. So, Oregon's going to get theirs in terms of these guys that they're in the battles with USC. And I'm not worried. I do feel really good about Benjamin. And I think, again, you're going to start hearing a lot more of these guys talk about making decisions in either July or early August. So we're inching closer to that window. I think these guys are really going to get set on taking these official visits in late May and June. And, a guy like Benjamin is one that I could see probably making a decision by somewhere at mid-August at the latest, if I had to guess.
And with Benjamin, I'd be curious to get your take on this, Justin. Knowing who else Oregon's recruiting in the secondary in 2026, I feel pretty confident saying that I don't think there's another DB Oregon is more heavily invested in than Davon Benjamin as far as longevity. They've been recruiting him since he was a freshman. We know, of course, about their ties in Southern California after getting Kayvon Thibodeau, also out of Oaks Christian back in the class of 2019. But it sounds like, you got Oregon, USC. He was at Washington yesterday, heads to Texas later this week, he told me. But I think this is really important for Oregon to get him on campus here in the spring, and then they're going to get an official visit as well.
No, you're right. I like your point there. This has been a guy that we've had on our radar for a long time, and that's no surprise, because Oregon has had him on their radar for a long time as well. So yeah, I mean, again, here's the one, you're going to say it, but keep chopping wood. Just keep chopping wood on Benjamin. No need to chainsaw down the tree today. Just, keep going and kill that official visit.
Okay, let's switch a little bit to talk about some team, Justin, because the spring game is this Saturday, and we're all super excited to see DeCorian Moore and Naeem Offord and Nasir Wyatt. I mean, you could throw any number of players out there. Dylan Thieneman, the Purdue safety transfer. There's been so much hype about him this offseason. So I'll just kind of leave it open ended and toss it up to you. What are you kind of excited about this weekend, and what are you kind of looking forward to?
Yeah, I know you and I probably plan on doing another pod this week before the spring game. We get more specific then, but yeah, I'm just, first of all, I'm thankful that there is a spring game. I think it's good for the sport. It's good for the fans of Oregon. I think it shows, Dan Lanning has a really good finger on the pulse of what matters and what's important. I mean, yeah, you take away practice and you don't allow media or whatever at practices, but you still put on a spring game, which I think is very big. It's very big for community. When in today's college football, where there's so much roster turnover, guys are transferring, moving over, you're getting 1-year rentals, you're getting brand new faces that are starters immediately. It's nice to have that opportunity to kind of see these guys and potentially maybe meet them after the game or whatever the case might be. Just kind of developing that relationship as a fan with the players that are on your team, versus just seeing that they're a number and hearing that they've done good at practice. So I think the spring game is super valuable. Of course, it comes with great thought and design that the spring game will be played after the spring portal window is officially closed. Obviously pretty smart planning on Dan Lanning and Marshall Malco's part. So excited for the game. Again, let me preface with this. Do not hop on and have any massive takeaways or knee-jerk reactions after this game, okay? It's very vanilla. There's like 4 play calls, and that's all the entire game is. The defense is playing a glorified thud scrimmage. Like, let's appreciate it and let's enjoy it, but let's not, write off this one player or, anything like that, or say the defense is cooked or whatever you're going to, whatever your hot take is after the spring game. Watch it, enjoy it, maybe see where the shortcomings on the team are, maybe see where the team is especially strong and go from there. I think for fans, this is my last point. I think for fans, this is the most excited I think fans have been in a while, because this is really Dan Lanning's first real true chance to kind of showcase the guys, for the most part, that he's recruited and developed for the last couple of years. We're going to have a bunch of guys out there, running with the 1s and 2s, seeing a lot of snaps that frankly, we just haven't seen a lot of game action of. And with practices being closed or frequently closed the past 2 years, this is the first glimpse for a lot of these guys that we've been excited about 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And so, to see the, see Blake Purchase back out there, to see Ife Obadegwu and the guy that we've heard a lot about, Kingston Lopa, had the one big game last year against Penn State, but we haven't seen a ton of. Want to see him, want to see the receivers, want to see DeCorian and more. Everybody knows that. Want to see how the quarterbacks look. The offensive line and defensive line do not have big takeaways from those because they mix and match. It's not like the starting 5 is playing the starting 5 on the line of scrimmage. So if you go out there and say, man, our offensive line is cooked, it's not a fair representation. So just enjoy what you get to see. Hopefully the weather cooperates, and then maybe go catch the baseball game after the Duck game as well. They play Oregon State after the spring game's over. So you can have yourself a hell of a Saturday in Eugene if you plan it right.
It could be a very fun day, and I think it will be for Duck fans that are out there in Eugene this weekend. But I'll just make one more point, Justin. I think 2 of the guys that I'm also really excited to see on Saturday, and we can maybe just talk a little bit about the big picture of it, is Dink Riggs, the talented running back from the Washington, D.C. area. I've been hearing a lot of hype about him. Also have to talk about Mekhi Hughes, the Tulane running back transfer, who just looked like, I mean, I don't know. I was watching his press conference. He seemed like he was just, almost looked like not a square, but just like, this dude is just so ripped. His proportions just seemed like they were all at like right angles or something to me. So I'm excited to see him run. And then also Cooper Perry. He's another receiver I've been hearing a lot of good things about this offseason as far as just his consistency. Maybe he's not the most talented wide receiver in that room, but he has just been rock solid for the Ducks this spring. And I think that people shouldn't forget about him or, let him kind of go by the wayside just because DeCorian Moore is the one that everyone's talking about.
No, I agree with you. And that's what makes the spring game so exciting. It's going to be some of the freshmen, the true freshmen that you are talking about. And then just like some of those guys that, again, they've been out there at times, in certain games, but we just haven't seen a lot of them. And, they're going to be in line for bigger roles this year. So, it's just it's an uncertain, but an exciting season coming up for Oregon. And this is kind of, for me, I always feel like this is kind of where it starts, right? Okay, spring game. Coaches have done what they can do so far this spring between, games install, getting the guys up there, trying to get them up to speed, evaluating guys on what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong, evaluating groups on what they're doing right and wrong. And you cap it off with the spring game. You study the hell out of it in the summer. And then, in the fall is kind of like, okay, it's getting shoved into overdrive. Here we go. It's August. It's time to do this thing. And, for me, I know I've said this once already, and I think you agree. It's just no matter what we see Saturday, and then no matter what we see on August, I think August 31st is Oregon's first game, 30th or 31st. Anyways, and what we see out of Oregon's first game this season, real game, I don't think will be the team that we see in mid-November and December. This team's going to grow. This team's going to develop, and they're going to take steps. And I think, you're going to see a better version of Oregon when it matters most. Having gone through a winnable schedule, they're going to be a little young, a little green to start the season. So there's going to be some learning bumps for sure.
Yeah, there's going to be speed bumps. I mean, we saw it with Oregon's offensive line last year, and then they got humming at the right time and were a Joe Moore Award finalist. So I think that you're not really excited for any of those hiccups or bumps in the road if you're a fan, but I think you are excited for just new faces and these coveted recruits that we've heard so much about, just seeing them in an Oregon uniform and out there on the field making some plays. I know that's how I felt last year when Dakota Fields had an interception in the spring game. Obviously, he got hurt and missed the whole year, so that was a bummer. But I'm hoping that we have some level of excitement that's kind of like that this upcoming weekend, and I just can't wait to watch it. So if you guys want to find more of Justin, you can find him on X at JHopkinsSD. You can find me anywhere at Torres Sports. Do us a favor and subscribe to the ScoopDuck on 3 YouTube channel. We'll be back with another show on Friday. That is our plan right now. And come and see us at ScoopDuck.com. Got an awesome message board community, and we would love to have you guys be a part of it. But until next time, thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of the Ducks Dish Podcast.